see a couple of changes in the bullets I made this afternoon after this thing's been printed, where I try to clarify some of this. Okay, sewer. What we do with sewer is the sewer fund had all these years of red numbers at the bottom, and the reason for it was that there's a pretty significant amount of depreciation. The cost of the water treatment plant is being depreciated over time. So a lot of people look at it and say, well, you know, we're not going to be able to get that necessarily charged for replacing that. You know, it's just the sewer rate's too high. So what we did here is we broke out the depreciation in a different color at the top. It's non-cash. So if you think about it, your revenues are here. Yeah, these are your expenses, but only the orange part of that slide is the cash portion. Okay, so yeah, we're going to show this big loss, some of these losses, but take into account that, you know, some of this is depreciating of the facility. Okay? But you do need to have cash, you know, the revenue minus the cash expenses for capital improvements and for debt service. And that's what you saw was here these years, when there was a significant difference between the revenue and the cash expenses. But you can see the squeeze in the sewer. Now, yeah, we still have a little bit of revenue in excess of cash expenses, but not nearly enough for debt service and capital needs. Okay, remember, if you go out and spend $100,000 on some capital item, it's not in expenses. It'll get depreciated off over time up here. So you need that gap that we used to have here to pay for those sorts of things. And that's diminished. Okay, now why is that? Well, we've looked at this. You charge a residential equivalent unit, an REU, on each one of these, or on each residence, and then that's used then to determine a factor for the businesses. So if they use twice as much water as a residence, they get 2 REUs as their charge. I took a look at the study that was done when you set the rates, and I think you're coming in about 100 units lower than was in the study. So they had a study, I think it was about 1,050 or so, Kathy, I don't know if you recall, units. So they set the rate at I think $23 something in the sewer fund, and there's only 968 units right now that are being charged. So the number of units that they anticipated paying is not happening, and that's causing some of the problem. Let's see, 07, you know, not much of a decline, fairly flat. 08's where we take the hit, and you assume that's related to the number of units that were just offline in 08 until the units were replaced. So, you know, what's different here, it's not the amount of electricity that's being used or the amount of liquor that you sell. In this enterprise fund, it's, you know, house or home times $23 something. And if the home's not there, you don't get the $23. It's not. It's just a flat rate. So when the home's gone, the revenue drops off. You just see the expenses not changing much. So and as far as the sewer is concerned, the last rate change was in 2006. I don't know what there's a plan there to revisit that. Or whether the belief is we're going to get back up to the number of units that were anticipated in that rate study.
They're looking at doing some mandated repairs at the wastewater plant, and in order to get PFA financing, we would have to have a rate study done. So we probably will be looking at a rate increase.
Does everybody understand that budgeted REUs? You know, I mean, they're saying, here's your expenses. You're going to have 1,050 units. Divide your expenses by that, you get 2,350. Well, if you only end up with 968 units, you're not going to get the money that you needed to at least break even. Okay. Then we'll finish up then on the utilities with the balance sheet. You talked about where does that leave us. You know, generally what was going on here is we have debt in gray. The gold at the top is due to other funds. And we mentioned earlier the water fund did owe other funds. We actually took care of that in 2006. It was all paid off. Cash was starting to creep back up. Debt was getting paid down, and then you can see what happens after the flood. Cash goes the other direction. This is electric, water, and sewer on a combined basis. Cash goes the other direction, and debt goes up, and so does the due to other funds. So it's pretty clear what caused the problems from this slide. And then this goes back to the point that those are borrowed funds that will go away when the FEMA dollars come in. Okay, this money will come in and we'll eliminate that gold part of the slide, but pretty significant amount of money that we're waiting for there, and it's having a pretty significant impact on your utility funds. FEMA owes us $2.1 million to these funds. Actually owes us more than that, but to these funds, FEMA owes us $2.1 million. Now this cash that we have here, you see in this last slide, the reason we didn't use this cash to pay off, why we still, we really don't have cash here. We owe this. And we still report this cash because we have to. The bond covenants require us to have a certain amount of cash around. So, we've had to borrow from other funds to keep the cash. We borrowed it. We did have borrowed it, so that's the problem. We got that those restrictions of the bond covenants say you have to have this debt service amount around, and you have to have these replacement funds set up to replace the facility. So, it's really critical that we get this FEMA issue resolved.